Yes, welcome in. Badgers fresh off a loss to Michigan. We'll get into that game, Jesse, but I think because we haven't done a show since I think it was November 18th, we've got some other games to talk about, some success to talk about, obviously out at the Greenbrier Classic in West Virginia, which feels like ages ago now. But I think big picture wise, we're certainly going to get into a few things, but we do need to touch on Michigan and how that game played out, especially at the end, and Max Klesmit and Stephen Crowell and all the stuff that played out at the Kohl Center on Tuesday night. We'll get to all of it. Before we do, Home Field Apparel is the official apparel sponsor of the Swing and the Camp and a bunch of other things that we do at the Zone. But they have the best vintage gear you can possibly find in the college game. Go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code Bucky24 for 15% off your first purchase. All right, let's get into the first loss of the season. Wisconsin has fallen. Their undefeated start ends at 8-1, or I should say ends at 8. They got to 8-0. They did not get to 9-0. Best start since 2013-14, but some of the stuff that happened on Tuesday night against Michigan is kind of the stuff that, is going to lose you games when you shoot 6 for 27 from 3 and your bigs can't contain 2 7-footers and all the things that go along with it. But, watching that game last night, it was like, yeah, that's how you're going to lose because Wisconsin's going to shoot a bunch of threes. They played well enough defensively, but they're not strong inside. And that's the result of it.
I'm not going to overreact to one loss in the big picture here because I think, and maybe we had this discussion or we were asked a question about it, what their record could be best case scenario. I want to say it was up to Chicago State, but let's just say it was leading into Big Ten play 8 games. I think best case before the season, you would have said maybe they could get to 6-2. Maybe they lose to Arizona. Maybe they lose a game like against a Pitt or something like that. And so they have far exceeded where I thought they would be. And again, I know we'll get more into some big picture, but that certainly has a role in how I view what happened against Michigan on Tuesday. They were not going to go undefeated and they were going to have a night like this, but you're absolutely right, Zach, with the way Wisconsin plays. These are some of the things that can trip the Badgers up. Yeah, they are making more threes than they ever have, and they're also taking more threes than they ever have. I believe their average per game at this point through 9 games is 26.2 threes, and so they're right on that against Michigan with 27. One thing I think they were able to do the last few games is when they weren't shooting particularly well from the outside, they were still finding ways to score because they can get to the rim, because they are the best free throw shooting team in the country, led by Tonje. But when you're not making threes and when you have a lot of trouble defending the way that they did inside, it is a recipe for a loss with Stephen Crowell in foul trouble with not making shots. So, they were right there at the end. Obviously, they had a 3-point lead after Klesmit drilled the mid-range jumper, and they didn't score the rest of the way. I also think it's fair to point out Michigan is a very good team. They've now won 6 games in a row. They have 1 loss this season. They were just coming off a win where they won the Fort Myers tip-off championship, including a win against a ranked Xavier team. I think the problem is there's going to be a lot of games that are like that or similar in the Big Ten because there's a lot of quality competition.
Yeah, and that's what obviously Greg said after the game. And I don't know that you're going to find 2 athletic 7-footers like that a ton on Wisconsin's schedule. But the fact that you have 2 7-footers and perhaps they got pushed around a little bit. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, certainly. And look, Stephen Crowell in foul trouble at any point during his career when he's played significant minutes, when has that been a good thing for Wisconsin? So that obviously causes some issues too.
I mean, the problem was that even when he was on the floor, he wasn't exactly playing the type of basketball that Wisconsin needs to play. I mean, he had, I think I saw someone write this, but I think Golden had more dunks than he did rebounds. So like that is a little, I mean, that's crazy. That just can't happen. And the thing is, he's a 5th-year senior, right? Like he's a guy that you just can't have that from. You expect him to be asserting his will against other guys, and that just hasn't happened this year. I think if we're talking about the very good surprise of John Tonje and some of the stuff that John Blackwell has done, on the other end of that spectrum is what Stephen Crowell has done so far through 9 games. It hasn't been the type of season I think that he was expecting or that the Badgers need him to have.
Yeah, I think that's part of what's so frustrating about, like, if you're a fan or even if you're on the staff when you see Steven, because you see what the ceiling can be when he is aggressive, when he wants the ball. He's capable of it. It's hard to stop a 7-footer who wants to score inside and wants to be aggressive and get rebounds. And maybe that's easier said than done. I've never been 7 foot. I never will. So you just think a tall guy should automatically dominate. But we've seen this for several years now, especially in these specific types of matchups, Zach, when there is another physical big man in Big Ten play, he tends to struggle. And I just think as a whole, they seem to have some issues defending the pick and roll with the bigs. And you're not going to find like two of those big guys that can go big on big pick and roll, that kind of action. But just look at what happened at the very end of the game where Wisconsin has a lead and then they lose the lead. And it's because Michigan's big man is just kind of taking over, throw it to him inside, and he's going to dunk the ball. So you've got to figure out a better way to defend and be physical.
And the dude was not like a dominating player coming into this game, right? Like he was averaging like 9 points a game or something like that. It's not like he was a dominating figure coming in, but he asserted his will very early. And then you're right. He scored the final 6 points. It was a personal 6-0 run for Golden down the stretch. Wisconsin didn't score. I think it was the last 2:37 of the game. That's tough, especially because it felt like you got some good looks. He also took some poor looks. He took some bad shots, but there were opportunities there. Before we jump off of Stephen Crowell, though, like the way that Michigan treated him, where they weren't really concerned about him shooting from the outside, like that, Wisconsin can't have that happen. They need to have spacing, and I think if he hits, his first shot, I think we've seen that with him a little bit, gets the confidence going. But Nolan Winter was also, I think, 0 for 3 from the outside. Crowell was 0 for 2. That is going to make things difficult in other places. But when we talk about poor shooting or poor shooting attempts or bad shots, I think a couple of them that would describe Max Klesmit with down the stretch there. The dude went 1 for 9 from 3. He was 3 for, I think, 15, or was it 3 for 14 from the field. And he has just not been able to find his shooting stroke this year. I mean, he's shooting, I think, 25% from 3. He's a career 36, almost 37% 3-point shooter. I think eventually he'll come out of it, but I don't think last night was the night that you wanted him to put up 14 shots.
Going back to the last 2.5 minutes or so, I really don't have a problem with the 2 3-pointers that he took. It's 2 possessions during that run that really make you hurt, I suppose. One of them is John Blackwell turning the ball over, trying to make something happen when he gets into the lane and then it makes a pass. And of course, the first Klesmit attempt among those misses where he just got into the lane. And it was one of those, like, I don't know. There are times I think when you call a hero ball or whatever, like whatever ends up happening at the end of the possession, I'm going to be the one taking the shot. It kind of felt that way. And he got caught up, picked up his dribble and just kind of tossed something up, kind of the free throw line extended. You cannot have that. But the 2 threes, they're not the worst shots in the world. I get that he has not shot it particularly well. The one that he did make was the first half, a super deep 3. That's what he's capable of. I don't know if this is just that it's been slow to come back from a preseason injury. We're now into 9 games. And so I don't know how long you can use that as an excuse. Sometimes this happens with shooters, but I would still want the ball in his hands if he's got a reasonable look towards the end of the game. Of course, it's just not great when you miss your final 3 shots personally, and the team loses a 3-point lead, but he's also the one who hit that mid-range shot to give him the 64-61 lead. So, it's kind of it's a tough spot to be in, but I'd still want him with the ball in his hands.
Do you think he was trying to get contact on the one that he just threw up on the?
I do. There? I would think so, based on.
You would hope so,
based on how that one ended. But again, you got to get a quality shot in a situation like that, and they didn't. And again, if you lose a game and you lose a tight game, it's going to be because of small stretches like that. I certainly give Michigan a lot of credit, but Wisconsin had it within its grasp and let it slip away.
So before John Tonje took that shot at the end, right? The one that almost went in that we would be talking about today had it fallen. It was very close. It was very Ben Brust-esque and how close it was to going in. But I don't think he had taken a shot in 7 minutes. And I know what they were doing defensively with him, with being able to put a 7-footer on him. That feels a little unfair. But also, Wisconsin needs to find a way to get the ball to him and get Wolf off of him so that he can go and do what he does. But I don't think he took a shot in the last 7 minutes. And John Blackwell obviously did not get a shot in the last. And I know he turned it over, but didn't get a shot very much late either. A lot of Max Klesmit shots. When those two the other two guys that were kind of carrying you and did carry you offensively, are you okay with that?
It depends who's taking the shots, but yeah, when you put it like that, John Tonje's got to get the ball. You've got to draw something up where he can get the ball because of the ways he can score. And if you want to over guard him at the perimeter, then he can get to the rim. How often have we seen early this season where he just is able to create contact and get some free points at the line for a guy who's shooting 90+%? He came into that game. I couldn't believe this just because of what we've seen with Wisconsin over the years, averaging 22.9 points per game, which was 7th in the country and 2nd in the Big Ten. Like, that is special no matter what the sample size is. And now we're about 1/4 of the way through of the regular season. And if you've got a guy like that, then you just cannot go 7+ minutes without him getting a field goal attempt. I don't care who's guarding you or how they're guarding you.
Right. And it's not even about the field goal. It's like find a way. Look, I think it's probably not realistic for him to be shooting 10 free throws a game. Like that, which is what he's essentially done. Even if you take the Arizona game out of it, he shot a ton of free throws almost every single game. And in this one, he was limited to 6. That may be more common in the Big Ten. I don't know if maybe they'll guard him or officiate it differently. But last night was not the night that to not be aggressive late when you were the one that John Blackwell, let's be fair, carried him at times last night because of especially his offensive rebounding. But John Tonje can't go that. He has to be more assertive. And maybe, I don't know. Do you think it's because he is new that maybe he doesn't have like that assertiveness just because it's still relatively new for him? Or is that something that your coach has to be like, hey, John, this is you. We're going to get you a look, and that's just what it's going to be?
I don't want to say he doesn't have it because he's played a lot of college basketball, and this is his 3rd team. So this is not like it's a new setting that he's never experienced. I know he dealt with injuries at Missouri a year ago, but he was the man at Colorado State, and he's established himself as the man here early, or certainly one of them. And so I think you've got to just recognize the situation, and coaches also have to recognize it as well. And, again, I don't know what they were trying to draw up, and you can say all of that, and they still had a 3-point lead with 2.5 minutes left. And again, a couple of those looks I'm okay with, but Tonje's been your go-to scorer, and just figure out a way to get him the ball and see if he can create something, because that's what has helped to make him special. He's not one of these guys that, at least to my mind, is reliant on, all right, I need a point guard to break everybody down, and I'm just going to be a spot-up shooter, and that's where I can do my damage. No, he's a true 3-level scorer, and so just figure out a way to get it in his hands, and he will create.
So Wisconsin's currently shooting 34% from 3. And I know Greg Gard has said it. They're going to shoot a ton of threes. Can they win? See, this is the problem with what happened last night. If they hit 8, if they shoot just a smidge better, we're probably not talking about it. But it's been a few games here now where they haven't been at that point per possession in terms of their 3-point shooting. Do they have the guys to be consistent enough to play this way and win games against good teams that are going to play better defensively than perhaps some of the I don't want to say nobodies, but some of the teams that you faced earlier in the year? It's
a question we've asked and discussed several times over.
I know, but
the years doing the swing.
Right, but lately it's been. I'm talking about just lately some of these games that they've played of late.
Right,
it hasn't. Whereas they were doing it earlier in the year.
Right, but I bring that up because there have been years where they were hot early and they kind of cooled off, and the question was, okay, so if they don't make their shots, can they win games? And we saw what happened; they fizzled at the end. And like I was saying before, I think one of the differentiators with this team is we've at least seen some situations where if they're not shooting it at a high clip, they have an ability to score in other ways. But 34% I think is manageable, and that is an overall percentage. It's not where they've been in recent games. And I think of it this way: if you miss more threes, there's a greater opportunity for offensive rebounds. And that's where I think sometimes the percentages are less important, because it does come back to the points per possession. Hypothetically, let's say you miss a shot, but you get another one on that possession, then it doesn't matter as much. But you're putting yourself in a little bit of a bind when that percentage continues to decrease, and you're going to shoot it as often as they are. But based on what we've seen, the style is not going to change. This is not a situation where you get to midseason and you're shooting 28% or something like that, and you say, all right, we need to take fewer threes. This is who they are, and this is who they want to be, the 26 plus threes per game. There may be a few games where it decreases by a handful, but they're going to continue to shoot it. They're going to continue to try to get to the rim and make free throws. And so I think this is a model that can win, but you're certainly putting yourself in a bind when you're only going to make a handful of those attempts.
Yeah, again, Greg Gard has said, he said it, I'm pretty sure he said it here when we were talking about it, a point per possession when you're shooting threes. Essentially, take your number of three-pointers that you make, times it by 3, and if it is more than the number of shots that you take, he's okay with that. Mm-hmm. Or I should say, not points per possession, but points per shot, right? And if you're getting at least 1 point on your attempts, or you know what I'm saying. I'm not explaining it well, but you know what I mean? Like, you have to, they've been around it most of the year. Pitt, they weren't, but they did hit some, and Greg talked about it after the game on Tuesday night. They hit some late ones, big ones late. But yeah, I mean, 6 of 27, it's not there. 5 for 20, it's not there. 10 for 31, not there, but close. And then obviously Chicago State was 10 for 30, so you're right on it. But that is kind of like how they're approaching this. And yeah, look, I think John Tonje was 3 for 5 last night. Probably needs to take, I mean, if you're shooting it that way, probably need to be a little bit more aggressive and find a way to get some more of those shots off. And not have a guy who's shooting 25% on the year take 9 of them.
Right. Because I look at this too and say, if you were to ask, if you're not happy with the approach, I would ask, what would you think the approach should be? Because you want to tailor whatever your plan is to the skill set of your players. Well, they have a lot of guys who can take and make 3-pointers. And like Greg has said, you don't want to settle for mid-range jumpers. And because they have found that to be the lowest in terms of their points per possession over time. So I don't have a problem. And I'm not saying there are people that do, but I don't have a problem with the approach they're taking where they're going to shoot this many threes. It's just that you've got to make sure you reach a certain bar and threshold in order to give yourself the best opportunity to win.
Yeah. And it's one game, and not going to overreact. I think Max is a good shooter. I don't have any doubt about that. And I think eventually he's going to break out of it. I think he will. I think he's had some games this year where he has, but that's a tough way to go out. When he's shooting that many shots in a game that is close. But if they're open, you can't turn them down. You do have to keep shooting them. And it's not like they necessarily ran a ton of stuff for him down the stretch. I don't know if that he was the number one option on some of the stuff that they ran at the end. He ended up being open and taking the shot, and he didn't hit him. So, but yeah, John Tonje, you got to have more than 0 attempts in the final 7 minutes. That's for sure.
I'm going to put this on a t-shirt. We're all about the slogans here. And I've said this before, but it's one of my favorites. Shoot till you're hot, shoot till you're not.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorites is back to square one, but
this is a basketball podcast, Zach.
I know, but hey, we're back to square one talking about whether Wisconsin should be shooting this many 3-pointers. All right, let's jump into a little overreaction or no. Wisconsin's 8-0 start was fool's gold. Is that an overreaction or no?
I'm going to say it's an overreaction. I think it's a large enough sample size against quality competition to show what the ceiling is. But we're stuck in this situation where we have the last 2 seasons to fall back on, where you saw them rise up the rankings. And the Badgers came into this Michigan game 11th in the country. They were top 10 teams the last 2 years, and it fizzled at the end. And I think that is probably a good reason why people are watching this with some cautious optimism. I would also say they're about to have a pretty significant game up at Fiserv Forum against a really good Marquette team. And this won't even matter should they win that game, because it would be another thing that you put in your resume. But I mean, the way that they've been scoring, I think, is really special. On the other hand, they did this a year ago, just not to this clip, and fell off. But I'm going to say it's an overreaction right now to say like it was fool's gold, the 8-0 start.
I mean, they got up to number 6 in the country last year.
They did in February.
Yeah, this is the third time in the last 4 years where they've started unranked and ended up in the top 11 in the country. None of those seasons turned out the way that fans certainly wanted them to, and with flameouts down the stretch. I don't know how you fix that. I would hope. I know that over the years, I think we've asked Greg about how you keep your team fresh and ready to go in February and March. But I think a lot of it is we have to play in February and March. We have to keep on playing these guys. We have to play our best. So it's not like we can give guys off, like time off. Like you can't sit guys or, cut their minutes back. Like they have to win games, and the guys that give them the best chance to win games are going to be out there. But that is definitely going to be something to watch. And people are already talking about it as if like it has already started, that the fall off of Wisconsin basketball has already started, and it's December 4th. So this one is taken from one of our questions that I got on Twitter or Blue Sky. You can find or X. You can find us on Blue Sky. You can find us on X for sure. Stephen Crowell has regressed since last year. Is that an overreaction or no?
I think it's an overreaction. That's such a tough one, because if somebody doesn't play well for a stretch, I don't think he's a worse player. But sometimes it's about figuring out where you fit in a given team, because every year, especially in college basketball, it's a different type of roster. But no doubt he needs to be better. And if he is better, it elevates this team to an entirely different level, because 7-footers like that don't grow on trees.
That's true. Yeah. Pete, this is one that's from Pete. He said, the little Cinderella run was cute. Time for Daniel Freitag to take over. Is that an overreaction or no?
Overreaction. Look, I'm a big fan of Daniel and his game, because I think he is very electric and can do some special things. But if he was ready to be getting more minutes, he would absolutely be getting more minutes. You can't tell me Greg Gard doesn't want him to be getting more minutes because of how important he was as a recruit and what he's capable of. It's just, he's a true freshman. And this is a totally different level from anything that he faced previously in high school ball or AAU ball. And that's why Kamari McGee's getting the majority of the minutes. But I think he's got a very clearly a bright future here.
Is this an overreaction or no? Carter Gilmore and Kamari McGee are the only players that improved over the summer.
Oh my God. Is this all overreaction? Where's the no?
There's no. I'm throwing all the overreactions, because that's what happens after you lose a game for the first time. Happens. You're off your best start in 11 years, and people do not care. They are just, upset.
Well, did you think we'd be having a discussion about somebody commenting about how improved Carter Gilmore is? Because for years, we know where the discussion has been. And I think he's been great in his role. No, I mean, Blackwell, do we need to go down the list? Like, yeah, Klesman has not shot it well. Crowell has not been as good as he could be. I think Nolan Winters showing more physicality and strength on the whole. Again, I don't want to base it off one game. We have a 9-game sample size now. John Blackwell, man, the leap he's taken. Like, what are we talking about here? John Tonje? John Tonje barely played a year ago. He put 41 on someone and 33 on another. You can't tell me he's not improved.
Yeah, I obviously have zero idea of whether John Tonje's improved. Maybe this is who he would have been at Missouri. I mean, the coach did say at Missouri that he was the best player on the floor.
But what did he average at Colorado State the last time he was a starter? Like 14 and a half or something like that?
He's pretty good.
He was very good.
Yeah.
And now he's in the conversation for The guy who most came out of nowhere in the portal to be in All-American contention. I think I saw someone on The Athletic refer to him as this year's version of Dalton Connect, which is like, now, I'm not saying he's going to be in the
an
NBA,
All-American and
but
a first-round pick.
No, I'm not saying the NBA part, but I'm saying like came kind of from out of nowhere, and very early on you went, oh crap, this dude is going to give you buckets every game or most games.
I mean, and he has, right? Yes. I mean, he's been in double figures every single game. Dude dropped 41. He dropped 30 something. I mean, he's been certainly a huge bright spot for Wisconsin. A few non-overreaction or no questions here. Did you see periods of sluggishness by UW last night? Might Greg Gard have to use his bench more to keep the energy level up consistently?
I don't know if I would call it sluggishness per se. I mean, Michigan is a good defensive team. I think we should acknowledge that they were giving up 60 points a game coming in while averaging 80. And I know, yes, you're playing sometimes teams that are totally overmatched, but I think this is what Big Ten basketball is. How often are we going to see an 85 to 83 game in Big Ten play? So I don't know if sluggish is the word that I would use. I think Michigan makes it difficult. Wisconsin didn't make shots, but I wouldn't say because of what happened in this game that you've got to alter your strategy in terms of bench minutes. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. But let's say we're having this conversation in a few weeks and nothing's really changed. Maybe we can reevaluate. I just think I want to pump the brakes a little bit on what happened in that game.
Chris says, has the typical February guard spiral arrived early this season? No, he's joking. Do you think the basketball team will have more losses this year than football transfers out?
Oh, what a great question. That is a prop bet of all prop bets. I feel like that's one you get before the Super Bowl on how long the national anthem is going to be. Okay, let me think about this one.
I mean, this is easy, Jesse.
Well, I just want to think about how many transfers out there are going to be. I think Wisconsin is going to have fewer losses because I'm pretty sure the number for football is going to be like 15 plus.
Yeah. Right. I mean, again,
of course, you know how we are on the camp that as soon as we record, something happens. So as we're having a conversation, what's the number? 7 so far?
I think it's 8.
8. Every defensive back ever. And
Leon Lowry and Cole LaCrue.
Lowry, Cole LaCrue, and Kurt Neal. So I think that's 8.
Yeah. I mean, we're not counting AJ Tisdale. So yeah, I think that'd be 8.
Yeah, well, he was before, so
right. But I'm thinking of that 23 class with all the DBs gone. So.
But I like the question, and I very much appreciate the crossover appearance here on the swing.
Yeah, for sure. The biggest question again. Alex says this was a problem at times last year too, but the lack of outside shooting from Crowell and Winter can really clog things up on offense. Any idea what they can do to address that? Keep shooting?
Yeah. Like that's why you bring these bigs here. That's one of the things that Wisconsin has been able to do well since Bo Ryan was here is you get these guys who are stretch players. And look, that's something that Greg talks about consistently. And it's one of the things he said that has changed the most throughout college basketball in general. And I think maybe Wisconsin was ahead of the curve because they just always or typically had big men who could shoot threes. So I'm not going to sit here and say that those guys have to stop taking it. You just have to hope that they make it. And maybe they hit one early and they get in rhythm. But certainly if you've got your 4 and 5 going 0 for 5 from 3, not ideal, right? It's safe to say.
Not ideal. Going over to some of the blue sky questions here. Barton says, with Crowell's constant foul trouble, do you think the Badgers should go small more often with only one of Crowell and or Winter on the court? And a follow-up question, is there an in-season portal with a 7-footer that doesn't get pushed around by the air conditioning?
Oh, whoa.
That's me. I should have read that before I read that.
Is the question what they should do once Crowell is in foul trouble?
I think with his constant foul trouble, do you go small more often so you're not having to deal with that, or you're not having to, play them together, which means you can't play Winter the entire time then because they're playing together.
No, I don't think so. I think you have to go with what you believe is going to work. Sometimes these lineups can be matchup based, but you're not going to, at least in my mind, change the starting lineup on a game-to-game basis because you're concerned that Steven Crowell might get in foul trouble. This is just a consequence of what happens when your starting 5-man happens to get in foul trouble. So I do think one good thing about this team in general, and I think Wisconsin has had this several times over the years, but they've got an ability as a whole to be pretty versatile. So you can have a 2 playing the 3 or a 3 playing the 4, but Corral is a little bit a different animal. It's just this is a consequence of what happens when he gets in foul trouble, but I wouldn't necessarily change the lineup to try and prevent fouls, if that makes sense.
I believe this is a St. Paul Badger. It was STP Badger. Would you think that was St. Paul?
Sure, why not? I mean, it could be anything. I
I'm
don't want to
going with it.
speculate.
I'm going with it. Why can't they guard the pick and roll? They couldn't do it. Couldn't do it last season either.
That's a good question. I do think that a big man who plays the way that Michigan's big did can give them fits, and I think look, how many teams are going to have 2 guys that tall who can do the pick and roll? I don't know. That's really interesting. I know that this is something that they've wanted to address, especially like big on big when Winter and Corral are doing it. I think it's kind of an unnatural situation for those guys to be in general, because usually you think of a pick and roll as like a point guard and a big or something like that. But it's not like they're not trying, and it's not like they don't have defensive rules. They have very specific defensive rules for how to defend. And I can say that because I know I go back to having the opportunity to just sit in on their film session earlier this season. One of the things they were talking about when they were, and I think it was, I said this before, but it was Greg showed them 29 clips from a game the previous night. And I think 20 of them were in the first half. It was a game, obviously Wisconsin won. And a lot of it was what things can we improve on. And one of the things was the bigs defending pick and roll, but it was situations where Corral and Winter were both in that situation. And so I bring that up to say it's not something that the staff isn't aware of and don't have specific rules for, but it's something that those guys have to get better at.
For sure. Last one. Rob says, have they peaked already? Or have they already played their best basketball this year?
No, I mean, I'm not gonna say that.
He was saying he's only half serious, I think.
I'm not going to say that, but I understand the trepidation here from the fan base because of what we've seen the last couple of years. I do think that the construction of the roster is such that they're capable of getting on further runs. It's going to be a lot trickier in Big Ten play because these teams, generally speaking, know each other reasonably well. Now, it may be different now in a transfer portal era where these guys were not a part of the roster a year ago, but I still think that this team has a very high ceiling, and I'm not going to let one loss deter me from that thought.
Okay. Badgers going on the road. First true road game this year. Obviously, they played at the Greenbrier, but they've played obviously all their other games at the Kohl Center, and this one will be on the road. This is a really tough stretch, right? They play Michigan, then they go to Marquette, then they go to Illinois. This is a difficult stretch, and getting a win at Fiserv would be huge. They've won the last couple. So what do you expect on Saturday? And can Marquette, I haven't seen I'll be honest, I have not seen a ton of Marquette this year, but obviously Cam Jones is that dude.
Yeah. I mean, I expect an electric atmosphere, and this is why this rivalry is so much fun, especially when both teams are really good. And maybe Wisconsin's loss dampens that a little, but it's still 2 top 11 teams coming in for state bragging rights. I think Marquette's going to play very well. Jones is a special player. It's funny. When Wisconsin played in the NCAA tournament in Brooklyn, the Athletics sent me to Indianapolis because they wanted 2 writers in every spot. So my job essentially ended up being covering Marquette in those first 2 games where they ended up going to the Sweet 16. And Jones is just such a special scorer. I know they don't have Tyler Kolek anymore, but that's a really good team. And I look, Wisconsin's going to be challenged tremendously. And if they can win that game, I think it will say a lot. As much as they've made statements so far by beating in Arizona, by winning in Greenbrier, I think beating Marquette would be on the road. A top 5 team would be a tremendous statement about what's possible for the Badgers.
It will be. And you're right. It's going to be loud. It's going to be fun. I think tickets are a little I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't take Grant Bill's word for this. He was saying that nosebleeds were like 150. I'm not going to say that's what they were. I'll look it up myself. He's not a journalist, even though he pens himself as one. But I think it's going to should be an exciting game. You're right. Wisconsin's loss may have dampened things a little bit, but it would be a signature win for Wisconsin for sure. And Marquette, that's just what Marquette has become these last few years, right? Like they've become when you win that game, that's a game that you're going to be talking about and have it on your resume come March. That yep, look, they beat Marquette, and Marquette is that. So yeah, should be a good game. What do you got?
Who do I think is going to win? I think I'll go Marquette this year. I don't know. I think that environment's going to really lift them. I think Jones is going to go off, and I mean they can get up and down, and they play really hard for Shaka Smart. And I know that Wisconsin plays hard for Greg, but is this the best Marquette team that we've seen in the last few years? I don't know. They're pretty good.
Didn't the one a couple years ago get up to number 2 in the country?
That's right. Oh, they were number 3. Were they number 3? That was at the Kohl Center, right?
That game was at 2 years ago. Would have been at Marquette.
Okay. Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Swing.